Thank you, Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Lord be with you. As we spend this evening reflecting on Mary, we recognize her virtuous life and the special mission that she has, which is, of course, to be an intercessor for us on behalf of her Son, and part of the heavenly family, of which we are united, and of which we continue in this world to ask for assistance and guidance in all ways of maternal care through the gentleness and loving care of our Blessed Mother. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, last week we start with the current mission of Mary in the Church and the whole sense of the economy of salvation, whereas Mary is representative and personification of the Church. And so Mary collaborates with Christ in the mystery of redemption. Of course, in the Incarnation, on the cross, the resurrection, the consent of the human race, and the donation of his flesh and blood came, of course, through Mary, which is intimately tied with the human nature of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And so it was the yes of Mary that was vitally important. And so the salvific activity of Mary is the conception and birth of Christ. Jesus drew Mary into his suffering to associate her with his redeeming act. So there was that close relationship between mother and son. And so Jesus receives Mary's dedication, love, and merits, and integrates her agony into his and offers them to the Father for our salvation. And so we see that Mary, in a sense, bore her own cross because of what her son was enduring for the salvation of souls. And so she did share, in his suffering. So Mary's suffering endowed her maternity over us by, first of all, childbearing, being the mother of God. Then Mary offers her son for redemption and becomes the mother of sinners. So that's like the second childbearing, when she becomes the mother of sinners. And Mary's cooperation allows our birth to supernatural life. And so, that mission of Mary is very closely tied to, the gates of heaven being opened, to all people. And of course, with our Lord ascension into heaven, there's that whole destiny of God's kingdom, which is here on earth, but it's not yet in its fullness. So we are part of the building of that kingdom someday to be realized in its fullness. So Mary becomes the mother of the church, because she's our mother and we are the church. And so Mary becomes the mother of the church. Mary's contribution to the work of redemption surpasses that of the church. And so her contribution, as a person, the work of her redemption is, of course, surpasses the capability of the church to do that. That's why she intercedes. And that's why we believe as Catholics that she has appeared on various occasions in various places to reinforce the church in, of course, maintaining faith, hope, and love. And so Mary precedes the church and is integrated into the passion of her son. And so Mary came before the church, and she was there at the feast of, or at Pentecost, of course, with the disciples, the apostles, in the upper room. So the activity of the church is exercised on a lower plane of application and interpretation of the merits and atonements of Christ's sacrifice. And so the activity of the church, supported by the saints, the angels, by Mary, is on the earthly plane, but its application and its interpretation is that the merits of those who continue to work, in the church in all the various ministries, is an atonement, for Christ's sacrifice. That we continue always, to, as we say, evangelize and continue to spread the gospel in order to gather in, for the end of time. Of course, when Christ will come the second time in glory. So Mary is the first and most important member of the church. And being the first important member of the church, she, of course, was very active in the church from Pentecost to the Assumption. And so she was very supportive, of the apostles and of the mission of the church during that span of time. And of course, then eventually, from the glory of heaven. By Mary's intercession and merits, she helps in the application and interpretation of the redemption. And so Mary, interprets for us. Mary, declares herself, to be the Immaculate Conception to St. Bernadette, or Our Lady of the Rosary to the children of Fatima. And so there's an interpretation, there's a sense, that her mission is being applied in the world in many different ways. And evidence is given to strengthen the faith through these personal experiences of the children and those that she appears to, in order that the message can be gently communicated, that there's a certain direction, that the world should take in avoiding, conflicts and avoiding those things which are not of God. Because as we know, the devil always tries to undo what Mary does. So basically, as we understand this, she had no official voice in the church councils. She does not hold the keys of the kingdom, and she confers no sacraments. Because her capacity is her prayers sustain and empower the church. And so she is in the position of being a mediatory activity. She mediates, so she's maternal. She basically is, perfectly supportable or supporting of the mission of the church throughout the world, especially in missionary activities. Because, she is, of course, the patroness of the missions, of the missionaries. And matter of fact, there's the American Missionary Society here in the United States is known as Maryology. And Maryology is a missionary group that basically is active in different parts of the world. And of course, Maryology is basically an institution, a missionary group dedicated, to Mary as the patroness of their missions, wherever they may be. Mostly they're in the Philippines, they're in Japan. They've made some inroads into China, and of course they were in China before the communists took over. And of course Mary is very active in supporting all missionary activity. So now Mary mediates, she continues to mediate from her Assumption to the end of the world. Mary has already risen. She is the person, and she is the personification of the resurrection of the collective church at the end of time. And so Mary has the glorified body. Mary is glorified because she is, part of the personification of the resurrection and the collecting again of the church till the end of time. Mary assists the church with supernatural aid and contributes to its eventual triumph. And so the triumph of Mary is of a supernatural nature. And in assisting the church, she basically, is also the patroness of vocations to the priesthood and the religious life. All Mary was, she received from Jesus and works with him. So the way that Mary works with Jesus, we declare her as a co-redemptrix. In other words, she helps with the mission of the church for the salvation of souls in union with her Son. And of course with the communion of saints too. You have all the saints in heaven, and of course you have the angels, the heavenly hosts, and of course we have the people in purgatory, who we pray for, and of course who offer their own prayers. So we are this big, extended family, and Mary, of course, is assisting her Son along in the communion of saints. So the Assumption is the prelude of the future bodily victory of souls. And so basically when Mary appeared, she appears in her glorified state, in her glorified form. And so just like Jesus, who appeared to the apostles, after his resurrection, they are given a vision of the glorified body. And so we see that the radiance of Mary, especially with the various artworks and the various pictures that have been developed from the way the visionaries like Saint Bernadette and the children of Fatima described Mary, we see that she is a very, very radiant person. And so she is the prelude of the future bodily victory of souls, because we, of course, are going to receive the glorified body in the fulfillment of God's kingdom in its entirety. So Mary stands next to Jesus, again, as co-redemptress, subordinate to him, in dependence on him. Okay, so now the dependence that Mary has on Jesus, it does not exclude productivity. In other words, she works along with her son. She works along with the free will of human beings. And so that dependence is a dependence of always pointing to Jesus, always leading people to Jesus, always interceding, especially on behalf of saving the souls of sinners, which she continues to pray and tries, of course, to make an inroad, into their life in some way that enables them to eventually find their way to Jesus. And so there is that dependence on Jesus, but her productivity in terms of being an intermediary or intercessor is, of course, of her own free will. Mary is ideal personification to which the church aspires. And so the aspiration of the church is to be in imitation of Mary in terms of faithfulness, in terms of everything that she continues to emulate in virtue. It is the nature of the church to promote those same virtues. Just like the saints, contribute to the church in their virtuous way of life, so Mary contributes in terms of her virtues, so that people can understand how to live the Christian life, and of course how to live, particularly for us, to live the Catholic life. Now, of course, when we talk about evangelization, we talk about some of the very diverse ways that Mary has manifested herself in history. And so I think it's important, for us to delve into how she has intervened in saving an entire society. And it's very, very interesting that as we go into talking about Our Lady of Guadalupe, it's important for us to understand the cultural context in which she entered into a society that was, of course, at one time extremely pagan. And we're pure pagans, separate even from the Western world. You had the Western world, of course, had its pagan beliefs, but the people in the Americas had their pagan beliefs, which were extreme. And it tends to be, in a lot of paganism down through history, there has always been this proclivity for human sacrifice. This belief that there's the need for human sacrifice. And so, to set the groundwork, we have the ancient Aztecs, that were in South America, primarily around Mexico. Now, the 12th century A.D., we believe that these people came out of northern Mexico. And when they came out of northern Mexico, they settled into, the Mexican area, what we know today as Mexico, around Mexico City. And basically, in the year 1325, the culture had advanced in terms of architecture and building and technology, that they settled on an island on Lake Texcoco, and that is the settlement is called Tenochtitlan, which is today Mexico City. So at one time, where Mexico City is, this was the main capital of the Aztec culture. And so they were a highly advanced society, of course. They were also well known, for their calendar, which was rather extensive, which is, the end of the Aztec calendar was supposed to be the end of the world and so on. And my belief was that the guy just got tired, so he stopped. So there's a sense of going on even further, As long as they're going to be around at that time, So anyway, so that's basically the way that the culture had developed and had that main city there in Mexico City. They built an empire basically primarily based on warfare. They built an empire that was a ferocious cult of war. So they were warriors. They believed in the pagan concept of force, and they believed that the stronger are the ones, the survival of the fittest, and the most powerful. Now they had a main deity. In this ferocious cult of war, they had a main deity or a main god, and I'm only going to spell because it's very hard to pronounce. And it's not all that important, but it just goes to show you, how difficult it is to pronounce some of these words. Huitzilopocatli. Huitzilopochtli. I guess this is about as close as I can approximate the pronunciation of that main deity. Now this main deity, of course, was the god of war, and he was also a symbol of the sun. Okay, so they were, I guess in a sense, sun worshippers. And every day, now this is what they believed, and it's amazing how they come to these beliefs. It's again a mystery of the ancient world, of which there are many mysteries, as to why they established certain beliefs in the way that they did. Every day, the god warrior uses the sun as a weapon to drive from the sky the creatures of darkness, the stars and the moon. So this is how they explained the cosmology. This was their belief, that this again, this constituted day and night. So in their way of thinking, the warrior used the sun as a weapon, again because of this cult of war and ferociousness, in order to drive the creatures of darkness, which are the stars and the moon. And so every evening, of course, the god dies. Okay? Every evening he dies. And of course, what happens is, and then of course the darkness, the creatures of the darkness return. So there's this tension, this creative tension, between the creatures of darkness and the god of the sun. Okay, now he needs strength for the next day. So, because he needs the strength for the next day, they developed a belief that his diet is human blood. And this is what led to human sacrifice. Now they had, of course, a pantheon of gods. They had so many different gods for so many different purposes. But it's interesting that they came to this conclusion that the god, in conjunction with their warlike understanding and the tension in creation, that basically this was important that this god be fed. And so what would be the thing that you would feed a god who was very demanding and make sure that you guarantee your own survival by his having the strength to bring day the next day? It would be human blood. So there's something inherent in the human being. There's something inherent in every culture that has something to do with sacrifice, the giving up of something. Of course, sociologists and anthropologists, studied many, many different cultures, and this concept of sacrifice is ingrained in our hard drive. The whole sense of we're needing to be active in keeping things going. Just like in our society, we go out and we work and we keep things going. And people are worried about the economy because we want to keep it going, but it has a lot of difficulties. So basically, there's probably going to come a time when people are going to have to make tremendous sacrifices to keep things going. So there's just something in the human nature about the need for sacrifice. Now, this particular god that's Huitzilopochtli had a mother. Now, the mother, her name was Coatlicue, Coatlicue, she of the serpent skirt. Okay, that's what that means. She of the serpent skirt. Okay, so now we have the symbolism of the serpent. Okay. Now, And the reason why I'm going into this with some depth is because this is what Our Lady of Guadalupe had to deal with. Okay. This kind of a culture. How can you deal with a culture that's so extreme in this manner? Okay. And of course, especially since we have the involvement of the sun, but now we have the concept of the serpent. And of course, we know we associate the serpent with evil, and Mary crushes the head of the serpent, okay, which is, of course, many statues have Mary standing, on the serpent. And so they had quite a bit of a belief in several serpent gods. Now, why they chose the serpent remains a mystery. Maybe it's because the serpent is a very mysterious kind of creature. It's a very stealthy creature. It's a creature that can show up suddenly and be anywhere. It's a creature that's feared. It's a creature that has almost kind of mystical power. Okay, so they're the serpent gods, and one of them is Quetzalcoatl, which I guess I won't bother spelling it, is a feathered serpent. And then you have another, which is Huacoatl, which is a fire serpent, and then Mixocoatl, which is a cloud serpent. So you have these pantheon of gods, and many of them, of course, are these serpents. So you have the cloud serpent, the fire serpent, and the feathered serpent. Okay, and so there was a place that in the city called the Hill of Serpents, Coatepec. It's a hill, and of course this is called the Hill of Serpents. Now the serpents were predominant in Aztec architecture. Okay, when you see pictures of Aztec, pylons and walls, they're filled with serpents. Okay, and so their architecture very much depended on the symbolism of the serpents. And basically, there was this wall. There's this wall of these representations of serpents. Okay, and this was to define the sacred spaces in ceremonial areas. So whenever they had any kind of ceremony in a particular spot, in a particular space or area, it was regarded as a sacred space, and it was always there a wall of serpents. Okay. So basically, the serpents were very important in Aztec religion. Now, the Aztecs, basically because of their warlike nature, basically captured people from other tribes in their conquest. So the Aztecs gathered captives for sacrifice. So this required more and more war, and because they had to have the capacity to get enough captives to satisfy the sun god. Okay? So this required more and more war, and more blood. Okay, so, and also they developed this belief that enemy hearts were needed. So that's why they cut out the human hearts in terms of human sacrifice. So the hearts were torn from victims while the heart was still beating. And they would have these times of sacrifice, which sometimes lasted for 4 days. Okay? And of course, the temple tops were where the altars were. Okay, this is where they had their human sacrifice. Now, to us, this is horrific. But to them, this was the normalcy of life, which shows how far a culture can go away from God, and actually delve into some form of demonology, because this is basically the worship of demons, of course, in their own ignorance, because this is, of course, to us is tremendously evil, whereas for them it was a way of life. Okay, so the festivals and the sacrifices are continuous in the Aztec ceremonial year. Each February, children are sacrificed to maize gods on the mountaintops. So that was, again, in order to bring forth the produce of the land. So in a sense, there is kind of a tie with abortion, in terms of abortion is a form of human sacrifice, the giving up of the child so that the mother can be free, And so they sacrifice their children, or certain children, into the maize god on the mountaintops. Now in March, the prisoners fight to the death in combats, like gladiators. They used to have this ball game. It was like a ball field. And the game, as it was played, was basically where those who won, they lived. Those on the team that lost, they were used in human sacrifice. And so this was their form of entertainment. So the priests dress in their skins, the skins of the killed. Okay, so they would skin people, and the priests would dress in the skins of the people who were killed in these games. Okay, I mean it's terrible, but this shows you how very much needed Our Lady of Guadalupe was, and how merciful she was in terms of sinners. You know, I mean, it's not like she condemned them. You know, it's not like she wanted to damn them. You know, or for all of them to go to hell. It's just she wanted an opportunity to save them, you know, because she is, you know, merciful. So in April, more children were sacrificed to the maize gods. In June, there were sacrifices to the salt gods. The salt is so very important in the preservation of food because there wasn't a refrigeration. And so there was even a salt goddess. Okay, so let's see. The toll. This is the toll. The annual harvest of victims was somewhere around 10,000 people a year, to 50,000 before the arrival of the Spaniards. So the culture had gotten to the point that before the arrival of the Spaniards, it was up to about 50,000 people. You know, and it's amazing because this is really a highly technological culture and a very, very, you know, elaborate culture. And this is what the Spaniards found. Can you imagine the Spaniards being Christian? How appalling this must have been to them. But the Aztecs could not understand why the Spaniards were objecting to their way of life. Okay, so yeah, but then what's interesting is that there was a prophecy. There was a definite prophecy in the Aztec culture. And basically, this is what the prophecy was. A Toltec king of fair skin is exiled by his enemies. Okay, he is a priest. Around 950 AD, a god of fair skin called Quetzalcoatl will return in the year 1 reed of the 52-year calendar cycle in their calendar. Okay? And so basically, it's interesting because the prophecy in 1519, a 1 reed year, Cortez arrives on the east coast of Mexico. And so they believe that this is the fulfillment of the prophecy. Okay? That this fair-skinned Toltec king is exiled by his enemies, and that around 950 AD, a god of fair skin called Quetzalcoatl will return in the year 1 reed, the 52-year calendar. Of course, the calendar is very complicated. But on that particular year, in the Western calendar of 1519, Cortez arrives on the East Coast. Okay, so battles are fought, and Cortez approaches. Of course, they were resisting, and they began to resist the Spaniards, so there were conflicts, you know. And so basically what happened was Cortez approaches Mexico City, or Tenochtitlan. There are many intrigues take place. Montezuma is mortally wounded, and the empire falls with the city on August the 13th, 1521. And this ends the human sacrifice. It's the end of the Aztec culture, and with the arrival of Cortez and the Spaniards, with the conflict, the intrigues, the moral wounding of the leader, Montezuma. So in a very short span of time, this whole, you know, culture is brought down, and there's no more human sacrifice. Okay? Now, this sets the scene to where Christianity eventually makes some inroads. And Christianity eventually takes hold. The Franciscans evangelize the last of the Aztec ruler, and the last Aztec ruler converts to Christianity. Okay. And the Franciscans were very active, in the mid-American area of Mexico. And so with this last Aztec ruler converting, the Mexico City becomes a noble city of this last Aztec king, or Aztec ruler. However, the Aztec people, or these native people, basically there's continuing conflicts with the Spaniards. Okay, there's continuing war, on a sporadic scale. There's also diseases from Europe which affect the native people. A lot of people died because of diseases that they had no immunity to. And of course, the Spaniards forced many of them into cruel forced labor, because they were, basically almost, on a slave kind of level. And so they were put into forced labor projects and so on with the Spaniards. The poor were abused and exploited. So from 1519 to 1531, there was this, basically the effect of disease, battles, cruel forced labor, abuse of the poor, and exploitation. Okay, now, in 1524, a man named Juan Diego, a convert, was baptized. This Juan Diego, already appeared to Juan Diego. Now, in the midst of the fallen Aztec culture, on December the 9th, 1531, at the age of 57, Juan Diego, on his way to meet some missionaries in the town of Tlacoalco, he encountered a woman on Tepeyac Hill. Okay, we all know who the woman is. The woman's clothing was shining like the sun, and the crag on which she stood gave out rays of light. Everything glowed like a brilliant rainbow. Okay, whenever Mary appears, there's this tremendous brilliance. There's this almost heavenly kind of phenomenon that has to be noticed. And it's very unusual because it's, of course, of a supernatural nature. So anyway, there was singing. He could hear singing. There was singing, and then the woman called to Juan Diego and called him my son. She declared herself to be the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus Christ. And so she asked him to come close. Okay, so there's a relationship established with one human being. Okay, that's Juan Diego. So Juan Diego, was chosen because he is going to be the instrument for the intercession of Mary. Okay. Because, again, Juan Diego is part of the church. So this is where the church, in the person of Juan Diego and Mary, are in cooperation with each other, and eventually was going to lead to the inclusiveness of a larger part of the church. So Mary was not dressed, Mary was not dressed like an Indian princess, but garments like in Palestine 1,500 years ago. She was also dark-skinned. Okay? And so she had a certain dress the way she was, and so as she was basically, what you would see, say for example, in Palestine during the time of Jesus. Now, of course, the book of Revelation says, a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pangs, in the agony of giving birth. Okay. Far from being clothed like an Indian princess, as we often hear, Mary of Guadalupe basically was dressed in a way where she wore a little undershirt on that cold wintry day. And so when Juan Diego beheld the Virgin, he prostrated himself and listened to her words. And so this is what, she said to Juan Diego. Know for sure, my dear son, that I am the perfect, ever virgin, Holy Mary, Mother of the one great God of truth, who gives us life, the creator of people, of what is around us and what is very close to us, the creator of the sky and of the earth. And so she's, declaring to him, on this kind of a scale, that what he has learned as a Christian, she is revealing to him as a reality in her person. Okay? And so that's why, she declares herself the Holy Mary, Mother of the one great God. Okay, so now the way that Juan Diego described Mary is that she had a very compassionate gaze, in her face, a very compassionate gaze. The Virgin instructed Juan Diego to go to the bishop of the region and tell him of her request for a little house or temple, which they called a tecala. Here I will give God to the people in all my personal love, in my compassionate gaze. Okay. So now this is, of course, where Juan Diego is going to have to convince a lot of people, that what he is seeing, is real. And so Juan Diego, of course, says yes, to what she's asking of him. And so in going to the bishop, it's going to require the building of a church. And so there will be a connection eventually between God and the church, the people, and Mary will express her compassionate love to the people. And so again, she declares, I am your compassionate mother, yours and of all the people who live as one in this land, and of all the other people of different ancestries, those who cry to me, those who seek me, those who trust in me, because here I will listen to their weeping, their sadness, to remedy, to cleanse, and nurse all their different troubles, their miseries, their sufferings. Okay? So she knows how these people are suffering, how they're being persecuted, and how they're being abused and forced into labor. And so there are suffering people. Okay, so now when Juan Diego went to the bishop, the bishop's name is Juan Samarada, he listened kindly, was under obligation to suspend belief until he could validate the story, which is perfectly natural, had to be investigated, as the church always does, even if Fatima and Lourdes. He asked Juan Diego to return another day. So Juan returned to Tepeyac with the idea of giving up the task. Don't call me, I'll call you. However, the Virgin appeared again, and Juan begged her, my dearest patroness, my lady queen, my smallest daughter, I went where you sent me in order to fulfill your word. He received me kindly and listened, but from the way he answered me, he thinks the house you want them to build here for you may be my invention. I beg you very much, my lady queen, my little girl, entrust one of the noblemen, someone who is esteemed, who is known, respected, honored, to carry out your word so that they will believe him. Because he has no credibility. He has no connections. He's just a peasant. So he's thinking in worldly terms that get somebody of influence, that would basically be able to, and bring this church to be built. But then Mary answers him in this dialogue. Listen, the smallest of my sons, be assured that those who serve me, my messengers, entrusted to carry out my word, are not few in number. But it is very necessary that my wish be carried out through your intercession. So she's saying, you're the one that's going to do it. And so the thing is she chose, Juan Diego because of his simplicity, because of his lowly station in life, and so her will was going to be done. She was going to have him be successful. So despite his humble protest, the Virgin repeated the assignment. Juan obeyed her, and on Sunday, December the 10th, he went to see the bishop again. Because Juan passed the first test by repeating the story without variation, the bishop asked for a sign from the woman. Okay, so Juan intended to do this. Now, his uncle, Juan Bernardino, was extremely ill, possibly from smallpox carried by the European conquerors. He wanted a priest to hear his confession. At midnight on Monday, December 11th, Juan started the long trek to Toloco. He tried to avoid meeting the Virgin as he approached the Peg Hill, still in darkness. But Mary intercepted him. "What is it, smallest of my sons? Where are you going?" Juan fell prostrate and greeted her. So he's trying to really, kind of get out of the whole thing. And so he says to her, "My little girl, my smallest daughter, my child, I hope you are happy. How are you this morning? Is your dear little body well, my lady, my child?" Okay? So you notice that Mary's being very gentle with him. She's basically understanding, his reluctance. Okay, so when she heard his excuses, the Virgin said, "Listen, put it in your heart, my dearest son, that the things that frighten you, the things that afflict you, are nothing. Do not let your countenance, your heart be disturbed. Do not fear sickness, nor any hurtful thing. Am I not here, I who am your mother? Are you not under my shade and protection? Am I not the source of your joy? Are you not in the hollow of my mantle, here in the crossing of my arms? Do you need anything more?" Okay, so again, you can see that she calms Juan Diego, and so that he remains open even in his fear. And she's telling him not to be afraid, understanding that he is afraid, but telling him and comforting him, to not be afraid. So the Virgin confirmed her petition to build again this little house for God that would symbolize a message of peace to help the whole world. The Virgin instructed him to pick roses from the usually barren and desolate hill and deliver them to Samaraga as the proof the bishop asked for. There, in spite of the winter frost, Juan Diego surprisingly found roses blooming in December. Juan picked them and put them inside his cloak, which is known as a tilma, because that's where we get the tilma. After the Virgin arranged them with her own hands, Juan went to the bishop's house on Tuesday, December the 12th. When he opened the tilma, a cascade of Castilian roses fell to the ground, the same kind of roses that grew in the bishop's garden in Spain. So this was the miracle that was to bring about the credibility of Juan Diego. Okay? And it's interesting, Castilian roses, from Spain. And so this connects the bishop with Mary now. So the bishop is now connected with Mary, through this miracle. So when Juan Diego left his home on that Saturday, December the 9th, 1531, it was still the night of the winter solstice. When he arrived at Tepeyac Hill, the sun was beginning to dawn. In the Aztec Nahuatl reading of cyclic creation, this might be called the beginning of the sixth sun, a new creation for the Indian people. And so from this paganism, you have this sense in terms of the sun, that as the sun rises on December the 9th, 1531, that basically what's happening is that this is, of course, in their calendar, the beginning of the sixth sun. And so this is a new creation for the Indian people, in terms of the evangelization that will take place. And of course, Mexico and South America will be some of the strongest Catholic cultures on the face of the earth. Okay, now, Our Lady of Guadalupe. In the midst of power and oppression, a light appeared out of darkness before the dawn to announce new light. In the apparition, the Virgin is seen as the center of creation, surrounded by the sun. Okay. And so the stars and the moon. And this is on the tillman, the way the thing is described. And so this is how the ancient culture of the Aztecs are going to begin to incorporate, or are going to be retranslated in order to be an evangelization tool, for Christ through Mary. Okay. And so the Virgin is seen as the center of creation, surrounded by the sun, the stars, and the moon. To the Indian mind, the apparition of the Virgin signaled the day of the birth of the new sun, the dawning of a new era. It is often said that she is blotting out the sun, proving that the Aztec worship of the sun god was over. This is only partially true. Mary transfigured their understanding of the sun god, the radiant Christ to them, in the many delicate gold designs of her tunic, in the glow of her aureole or mandorla, a halo of golden rays that surrounds her, and as she stands on a crescent moon, which is supported by a winged angel, God's messenger. Okay. So what we have here is Christ is the sun. And so you've got these ancient beliefs that were pagan, that they're being fulfilled as an evangelization tool, where she is radiating Christ to them. So the people, the entire culture is being led to Christ by Mary. Okay. Our Lady of Guadalupe's womb. Okay, this is again part of the manifestation of the tomb. The radiance that surrounds the Virgin of Tepeyac becomes brighter as it descends towards the moon. The height of Mary's sash and the folds of her tunic showed the Indians that she was pregnant. The black belt she is wearing is the Aztec maternity belt. Again, something from the culture. A symbol that may have helped end the Aztec ritual of sacrificing children to appease their gods. Dr. Carlos Hernandez del Castillo of Mexico City suggests that Mary is very close to giving birth to Jesus Christ. The sun god, the sun child, El Niño Sol, is in its descending position, ready to come forth with light for a darkened world. So Christ is being given birth in this new era of this people. Okay. And so it shows the infinite mercy with which Mary is approaching the salvation of these people. And so we see the whole transformation of paganism, into a road or an inroad into Christian belief. And of course, this is exactly what happened, in terms of the missionary of St. Patrick in Ireland. Is the using or the reinterpreting or the use of certain cultural tools to bring people to the knowledge of the truth of Jesus Christ. Okay, and this is what missionaries learn too, is how to basically see what is good in a culture and to use that goodness to introduce people to Christ. Okay. Now, Our Lady of Guadalupe, some more on her tunic. The Virgin's tunic is embroidered with flowers. They are not merely decorative elements. The Aztecs, who spoke the Nahuatl language, used glyphs or hieroglyphics to tell a story. Janet Barber states that Nahuatl is a symbolic language that has meaning far beyond words. To the indigenous peoples, the image was not only an extraordinary icon, but a text, a document, dense with the symbolic language of the Mesoamerican people. When the Indians wanted to speak about divine revelation, they refer to it in terms of flor de canto, the flower and song, the complementary union of two words called difrasimos. One of the flowers on Mary's tunic is over her womb. It is the four-petaled Mexican jasmine, the flute player flower, flor de canto, which speaks of divine revelation through the incarnation. Even though the fifth son had died, the sixth son was to be born, Jesus Christ, the Son of Justice, with its healing rays. And so this sixth sun was very important to the Aztec people. So the sixth sun is the birth of Christ into this culture. The sun of justice with its healing rays, foretold in Malachi chapter 3, verse 20 in the Old Testament. The 9 large heart flowers are all over the tunic, speak of the crucifixion. The heart flowers speak of resurrection, as the blood-red seeds burst into new life, and are a metaphor for the beating heart torn from the sacrificial victim. So we see that they're going to be introduced to the sacrifice of Christ. You know, the sacrifice of Christ on the cross for the remission of sins and for the salvation of souls. So it's a complete reinterpretation. So the heart flower, you know, is to be seen as something that's life-giving. It's not the taking of a life, but it's the giving of life now. You know, and so basically, you know, this metaphor for the beating, you know, heart torn from the sacrificial victim. When we look back at how horrific that was, when we think about how that was important to them, okay, we begin to see that it's something that is even being used in mercy to bring the people to Christ. Okay, the message of the heart flowers, the message of the heart flowers was that human sacrifices were unnecessary. Okay, and so the tilma tells a story. The tilma is, you know, part of the language of the people, which is pictorial. And the first letter of John says, it says, God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the atoning sacrifice for our sins. So this is going to make perfect sense to the Aztec people. The sacrifice of the Son, the sacrifice of Christ, and for our sins. So while God's love seems obvious to Christians today, it was astonishing to the Indians because they did not associate the idea of love with God. But God was warlike. There was nothing loving about their God. So what was absolutely astonishing to them is that a God that's loving. And so this begins the fulfillment. This begins the power of revelation in this entire culture. After the Spanish conquest, the natives were told that they were incapable and unworthy of learning. Often the experience of Mexican Americans and Latinos in American schools today, at least at one time. The good news that Mary of Guadalupe brought is that all human beings are born with equal dignity and worth before God. And so Our Lady, there's a name for Our Lady in their language. Our Lady is known as, and is T-E-C-O-A-T-L-A-X-O-P-E, which is Guadalupe in Spanish. So the translating from the Indian word, you know, to Spanish, it becomes Guadalupe, which means, and this is very interesting. Guadalupe and the name of Our Lady in the Aztec language, it means she will crush the serpent of stone. Very, very amazing. You know, so here you have these serpents that they were worshiping, which were beyond doubt probably of a demonic nature. You know, is that so she will crush the serpent of the stone So
how is it spelled, Father? T-E-C?
Their language, T-E-C-O-A-T-L-A-X-O-P-E. Yeah, she will cross the serpent of stone. And of course, you know, Pope Pius XII declared Mary as the patroness of the Americas. So I think we're at a point here now where we probably need to take a break. Okay, are there any questions before we break? Any questions?
I'm going to take a better look at my picture of Guadalupe.
Yeah.
We made a picture of the statue in New Mexico at a church, huge.
Yeah.
So we took that picture and blew it up. So I'm going to go take a better look at it.
Yeah, really, because every detail says something. It's a story. It's the
Very.
connection between the ancient culture and being transformed into the Christian culture that now is very strong there, as it always was. Has anybody ever seen the tilma? Anybody in New Mexico see the tilma?
Not real, just
Okay.
pictures.
Just pictures, yeah. Yes, I think we've all seen pictures of it. But it's actually quite amazing that it's still preserved and still exists in the form that it is, even today. It's quite amazing. Okay, let's take a break. We got some.